There was a courtroom ruling in Chicago today, and we're going to look at how Fox News and MSNBC covered that story. According to the Associated Press, a federal judge in Chicago, Sarah Ellis, ordered Border Patrol Chief Gregory Bavino to appear in her courtroom every evening at 6 p.m. to explain how his agents are carrying out immigration enforcement in the city. The order followed reports and video showing federal agents using tear gas and pepper balls in Chicago neighborhoods during recent protests. Judge Ellis required agents to wear visible identification and body cameras, and she's calling this an unusually high level of judicial oversight for immigration enforcement in the United States. So, that's what happened according to the Associated Press. Now let's look at how Fox and MSNBC are covering that story.
The cruelty, the violence, the impunity with which they act, practically every defining feature of the second Trump administration and the efforts to hold Team Trump accountable collided in a Chicago courtroom today. A federal judge sharply questioning top Border Patrol Commander Gregory Bavino over brutal tactics federal agents have used against protesters and journalists in Chicago, especially in the wake of her order that puts limits on the use of tear gas by immigration authorities. The Chicago Sun-Times reporting that Judge Sarah Ellis told Bavino, quote, "It is difficult for me to see that the force being used is necessary to stop an immediate and serious threat of physical harm to a person." At times, Judge Ellis was sharply critical about how Bavino handled incidents between residents and federal agents. Ellis saying, quote, "That was the instance as well where children were present and they were dressed up in their Halloween costumes. Those kids were tear gassed on their way to celebrate Halloween in their local school parking lot. These kids, you can imagine their sense of safety was shattered on Saturday, and it's going to take a long time for that to come back, if ever."
All right, so we have a lot of really heavy moral framing here from MSNBC. They're using terms like cruelty, violence, impunity in this really short, sort of percussive phrasing. I think what that does is really make it sound judicial or like a sermon or something. It adds a lot of moral weight, and it primes us to see this coming courtroom scene as a reckoning of sorts. They are using this image of suffering children, children in their Halloween costumes being traumatized. They're using that to shine a spotlight on what they're framing as a moral failing of policy by the Trump administration. And they're spending a lot of time at the beginning of the clip linking the Trump administration to these actions. They're saying things like every defining feature of the Trump administration and Team Trump. So in contrast to the Fox clip we saw, where there was a lot of protest, a lot of chaotic, we were seeing ICE in conflict with citizens. Here we're seeing very sort of militaristic images of ICE, and we're seeing a lot of close-ups of, Bavino himself.
Let's take a look now at what federal agents are up against every day. They try to do their jobs.
Hold back, hold back. Get back!
The hate for law enforcement and ICE agents in this country is out of control. In a moment, Border Czar Tom Homan will react to Chief Bavino's testimony and the continued violent attacks on law enforcement.
Okay, yeah, so very urgent, very defensive, very dramatic feel from this Fox News clip here. Using terms like, up against this every day, and then trying to do their job. She kind of emphasizes try. creating sympathy for the federal agents. We see a lot of sort of very shaky, hectic footage. It's very blurry. It like kind of physically makes me dizzy. It's very uncomfortable to watch throughout the whole thing. The audio, if you remember, was very screechy. There was a lot of screaming and just very uncomfortable sounds, shouting, sirens. I think the effect being, kind of before we really know what the clip's about completely, before we really know what the whole story is, we're already feeling a lot of sympathy for the subjects of the story, and we're sort of physically uncomfortable already. We're already on edge. We're grinding teeth, and so they've really primed us to feel sympathy for law enforcement and to feel fear for the public. I think this is, in my opinion, they're kind of trying to start with chaos, and they're ensuring that when the allegations in court come up later, at me as the audience, I'm already going to see the agents as victims defending order. So they hang on this protest footage for almost a minute, and then the commentator comes back, and in this very somber, very heavy tone, very slowly, she's talking about the hate for law enforcement and ICE agents is out of control. First of all, she's lumping ICE agents in with all of law enforcement. So instead of thinking, people are pushing back against ICE agents or this sort of special enforcement group, they're kind of lumping it in with police officers, just your average person that we see in our neighborhoods every day. And then they're sort of repeatedly using terms like continued violent attacks, etc. So before we even get to the courtroom, before we even hear about the story, we're already really primed to feel a certain way. I think my takeaway from this episode is to try to be really aware of priming moving forward. And priming works in 3 stages. There's exposure, activation, and application. So in exposure, you're presented with an idea or something. So like in the example that we had from MSNBC, the story opens up with these words: cruelty, violence, impunity. And then the activation happens. So the words link Trump and the Trump administration to systemic abuse. And then we have application. So everything that we hear after that is going to feel like proof of that moral framing.